We are stoked to welcome men's wellness coach and writer James Rafael on board as a Warrior Addict Brand Warrior. James had a fast-paced career in branding and marketing and eventually found his way onto the mat teaching vinyasa flow and mindfulness in Soho, London. Hi, James.
Hello, how's it going?
I'm well, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
Well, let's go right back to the start. Tell us about your link with the Canary Islands and your subsequent journey to London.
Right, so I grew up in Tenerife, and part of that has always stayed me in the sense that my upbringing was this kind of wild, outdoorsy upbringing. And if you've been to Tenerife and you get outside of kind of the crazy cities and all that stuff, it's actually quite a rugged, wild place. And there was a sense of exploration and of mystery and of really connecting to nature that I've kept and is still part of me. So it's really important for me now to stay connected to nature. And part of the joy of these practices of things like yoga and of mindfulness, to me at least, are that they help me connect to that sense of exploration and mystery, but in a way which is no longer facing outwards, but rather facing inwards to exploring the terrain within and what lies inside.
And how do you these days stay connected to nature? And you're living in this big city. Do you get out of London often?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I live in Soho, so it's not the most conducive place in some ways. But you know, nature is everywhere; it's all around us. And part of my practice really is, if you can get to a park, if you can even acknowledge that there's a tree in the street, as crazy as that seems, that actually nature is all around us and we are part of it, even in the city. And just being open to that possibility helps me feel grounded, helps me stay connected to my roots. But yeah, as soon as you can get out of London and actually get into green space, that's something different, that's something really special.
You had quite a hectic career in the beauty industry. What made you switch to a career in yoga?
The funny thing was, many people who change career, or particularly if they're going to teach yoga or something, might leave behind a job because they really didn't like it, or they weren't getting something from it, or they in some way wanted to leave that behind because it wasn't working for them. And that was my career for many, many years, actually. I found it very difficult, very tough. But I actually left really on a high, and I left when I felt really competent at my job. I was really enjoying what I was doing. And I finally got a good balance, which seems weird to suddenly leave your job at that point. But it kind of, for me, it was about, I've done everything I can here, and my own personal growth and development really stopped there. There wasn't really anything else for me to move into. And so as much as I loved the industry and what I did, it was the right time for me to move forwards. And, and I've been practicing yoga for quite a few years by that point. It had always been kind of growing in the background, and that wave just took over, and I went with it. The opportunity opened up. So, and then you find yourself doing something totally different.
So I know that you're a graduate of Cambridge. Where does that sit in your timeline? Was that before beauty or after? Or
So the reason that's interesting and that's relevant in some ways isn't because it's Cambridge per se. I mean, getting into kind of higher education, and as anybody who's been through an education system knows, it's very much kind of one-pointed. You have to deliver in this very limited stream, and it's really about achieving and getting through gates and getting certain grades and getting into certain schools. And many of us are really good at that. Many of us are kind of high achievers or type A personalities, or might identify with that desire to kind of push and to be better and to be the best and that competition. And certainly that was where I felt I had value. If the only place I had value was by delivering. And so I ended up in that particular university, and it all becomes very interesting when you then take that kind of personality type that, you know, I had and still do have to a degree, and bring it to your yoga mat. Because to me, what's interesting is that the tendencies and the habits that we have in our daily life, if it's to push, if it's to deliver, if it's competitive, we bring to the mat, right?
Yeah.
So these type A's, myself included, come to the mat and we want things like Ashtanga, we want strong practices like rocket, we want handstands, arm balances.
Yeah.
Right? You know, you hear me. I love all that. And it's not to say that that isn't relevant or, you know, rich, because it is. But the question that I pose to people is really, what groove are you deepening by being on your mat? Like, what are you actually making deeper? And if you know in your life you have a habit to push too hard and to burn yourself out, really consider what kind of practice you're taking on the mat. Because for me, for many years, I went hard and fast into physically challenging classes. And whilst I still love that, where I found the most liberation, the most healing, and the richest part of the practice has actually been practices like restorative and practices like Qigong or Tai Chi, which have a more introspective quality. And actually that tends to be what we need more. So, you know, some people aren't that way. Some people prefer something softer and more relaxed, and they aren't kind of pushing all the time. And maybe they could benefit a little more from some of those stronger practices.
Yeah.
How can the practice help round you out and help you find balance against your natural habits and tendencies?
Wow, I love what you're saying there. That makes total sense. And I know that one of your passions is the preservation of the richness of the history of yoga. How do you incorporate that into your teachings?
Right. Well, it's a tricky topic, isn't it? I mean, I'm white, I'm male, I'm middle class, living in England, and I'm teaching something which, from a lineage perspective, is 4,500 years old, depending on how you view it and where you draw your line in the sand. But it's still important to me to try and honour as much as I can in my teaching and in my own practice what I feel is the essence of the practice. But it's not to say that all these new kind of exciting variations and avenues that yoga is taking aren't relevant or enjoyable, but we have a responsibility, not just as students, but as practitioners, as to what is yoga going to be in 50 years' time. And that's what's important to me, that question. So if I ask myself, what am I contributing as a teacher, and where do I feel like I want to offer yoga, then it can't just be about purely physical practice, because that's not true to me and that's not true to the tradition as I see it. So to me, what I try to bring in class, yes, is to draw in some of the deeper philosophical traditions and roots of the practice. You know, why are we doing this? What's the kind of end goal with this? Because it's not about physicality, right? And it's heart, asana was preparation for pranayama, and breathing practices, preparation for meditation and higher states of absorption, samadhi, enlightenment. So when the practice itself becomes the end, I think we're missing out a lot.
Yeah.
And I think if we look past the physicality of the practice to what else we can unlock in terms of healing, in terms of freedom, in terms of liberation, then it becomes interesting. And negotiating those topics, bringing those questions into a class, I think is really important, because without it, we're missing out on a lot of the richness of the tradition, which to me, at its root, is about liberation and moksha, kind of freedom.
James, there's something that I'd like to touch on, and something that you've been quite open about, actually, and that is your history with addiction. Are you able to talk to us about how you were able to overcome this with the help of yoga, with meditation?
Right. So, I mean, interestingly, it was kind of an overuse of drugs and alcohol, and my life was spiraling out of control, that brought me first to meditation and meditative practices. And in the early years, it took the edge off for me. It helped occasionally get a bit of control around going out every single weekend, around, using drugs during the week. And occasionally that meditation practice helped just calm me down enough to ride out the urge to use. That led me into yoga practices, and same thing, kind of the yoga gave me a different way of looking at myself. One, it gave me a very different way of looking at my body, and particularly, as a man in London, as a gay man, the kind of focus on what my body should be, what it should be for, what it should look like, this kind of hyper masculine, icon of what a body should be. Yoga gave me a different way of looking at that, and that was quite revolutionary. It told me that my body could actually be considered, attractive or beautiful or interesting because of what it could do, the way it could move, rather than purely the aesthetic aspect of it. And then, moving from that, there was greater and greater freedom and greater realizations that opened up to me over the years through the practice, and just this ongoing process of letting go of the expectations I put on myself, letting go of the expectations that other people, that society puts on me. And something about coming back to the mat over and over again helps you connect to what is present and to what is true. But when you get a taste for that, you move towards that, and as those addictive habits and tendencies start to soften. And that's not to say that I could have got clean and sober without recovery programs, without the help of amazing drug services based in London and Soho, without the work of things like Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. All of that was an integral part of my recovery. Yeah. But without yoga, without mindfulness, I wouldn't have stayed clean. And ultimately, it's those practices that now bed me into the present moment and keep me feeling satisfied, help me feeling calm, and ultimately help me seeing the bigger picture, that there's more to life than kind of going out every weekend, and there's more to life than thinking that happiness and fulfillment lies in purely the way that I look or what I do or what my activity is at the weekend. So, yoga is liberation, and it liberated me. So.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. And really happy to hear that yoga helped you through that difficult time. For guys that are thinking of taking up yoga, but there's something that's always stopping them, what would you say to them? How could they overcome that?
It's a difficult question, and I think for a long time my answer would have been that lots of men feel intimidated to come to yoga studios. They feel like it's a women's practice, all this sort of stuff. I don't necessarily buy that anymore. I think most guys, or a lot of guys who are aware of yoga, don't see it as this kind of easy lounging around, stretching out, not for me kind of practice. I think there's been enough time and enough kind of people being vocal about the benefits of yoga for sports, about the benefits of yoga if you're lifting, if you're doing weights, and also just about the benefits of yoga for kind of mental well-being and kind of managing stress. So I think that guys are much more open to it. Now, bridging that gap between being open to it and getting into a studio, I think there's a few things that can help. One is, the work of doing stuff online, like using videos of, Warrior Addict, some of the flows that we have, and really working into those and seeing and exploring a little bit in a safe environment what it feels like to move, what it feels like to get into body. And then maybe that is enough encouragement for guys to move into a studio environment. And my advice would be to look around. There are many men's yoga groups who specialize in working with men's bodies particularly. The environment maybe is less intimidating to some guys who kind of don't want to be emasculated by a super bendy, super strong lady. If that is an issue, there's men's groups that you can go to. And also, I would just throw the gauntlet down and say, give it a go. Life is nothing if it's not for you to experience new things and to have new challenges. And we're perfectly happy to accept challenges in specific ways, if it's to do with work or if it's to do with lifting weights or something like that. What's a real challenge? Maybe it's getting outside of your comfort zone. going to a space and doing something which you've never tried before, and there is ritual reward in that. So the gauntlet is thrown. Dig deep.
Take the plunge.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks so much, James, for talking to us today. But before you go, could you just leave us with some words of wisdom?
Well, I'm not sure about that, but
I'm sure you can.
What I will reiterate is that at the heart of yoga, it is about freedom. It's about liberation. And whether you view that as being liberated from a body which has become tight or stiff, whether it's about liberating yourself from stress, from the pressure of society and of the workplace, and of family life, or whether it's a deeper liberation away from the paradigms, the habits, the mental structures that you've had for your whole life that you think you have to live by, that through the practice, somehow they can crumble, and there's an opening up to the possibility of being and doing and having so much more than you thought you were supposed to. And for me, yoga then is a quiet act of revolution, because not only does it change ourselves, that spreads out in a wider sense and is starting to change society and the way that people view their place in the world.
Beautiful words of wisdom there. Thanks, James. Now, what about, where are you teaching in London? Where can people come to your classes?
So I tend to teach mostly in Soho and West End, but I'm teaching across tri-yoga centres, also a fabulous studio called Good Vibes, and also if you are aware of gyms such as the Third Space, I also teach there. But also I set up my own classes and my own workshops on my website. You can find them at jamesrafael.com. And also through my work with fabulous Warrior Addict.
Wonderful. Thanks, James. Thank you very much again. See you later.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure. Bye-bye.